Hello and welcome to the Culture Swally, a podcast dedicated to Scottish news, culture and media. My name is Nicky and I'm joined as always by Greg.
Hey Nicky, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a summer bachelor as my family have gone back to the UK, so now I've got nothing but time on my hands.
So what are you doing to fill the time on your hands?
What have I done? I completed The Last of Us Part 2 the other day.
Oh, how is it?
Yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good. I can't really tell you much about it without spoiling it, because there's a few, like this sort of story. Yeah, it's really good. Really enjoyed it. And I kind of promised myself a bit of a 1980s film renaissance, but so far I've only watched National Lampoon's Vacation.
So you haven't been watching any Scottish 80s films?
Not yet, but I will.
Well, we can't talk about that. This is a Culture Swally.
Yeah, I know. I'll save the 80s Scottish films for future episodes of the podcast. But I say an 80s renaissance. It was more sort of John Hughes scripted or directed films.
Well, at least that'll keep you busy, and we will find plenty of stuff to keep you occupied on the podcast.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, everyone, for downloading. Just to reiterate, I know you've listened to our first few episodes, but Greg and I have been friends for a long time, and we like to keep up to date with all the news and culture from around Scotland. And we thought it would be a great idea to record it for you guys.
Yep, we don't both currently reside in Scotland. Nicky's in Amsterdam. I'm in the Middle East. I won't say where, not because I'm on like some secret government work or anything like that, just because it's, let's just say, one of the more conservative Middle Eastern countries. As Nicky says, we're very proud of where we come from. We're particularly enthusiastic about Scottish movies, music, films, TV shows over the last sort of 40, 50 years. So as well as discussing some of the lighter Scottish news stories that we've come across online over the last week or so, each week we'll discuss hopefully a seminal piece of Scottish cinema or a television show. So shall we make a start on the news?
Yeah, let's crack on with the news. What have you found this week that has entertained you in our bonny homeland?
Well, I found a particularly good one, but I don't know if I'll maybe keep it for last. The first one, so obviously with the current health crisis, Scotland and the rest of the UK have been starting to open up things again over the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks. Restaurants have been closed, obviously, because they're seen as a high-risk area for transmission and whatnot. So a lot of the drive-thrus for like McDonald's and Burger King, KFC and such have been reopening over the last few weeks, and they've been very, very busy. We're not the heart disease capital of Europe for nothing, and people have been flocking back to get their favourite fast food. So the headline that caught my eye comes from the Daily Record: "Nae luck as horsebox gets stuck in Scots KFC drive-thru. Punters in Kirkcaldy couldn't believe their eyes at the fast food joint in the town's central retail park." There's some photographs there of the horsebox. It says a Scots KFC car queue ground to a halt after a horsebox got stuck in its drive-thru. Images of the lodged box near one of the order windows were shared on social media under the caption "Horsebox causing havoc in KFC Kirkcaldy." Locals didn't hold back in their reaction to the peculiar problem. One wrote, "The horse will be saying nae luck to folk waiting in the queue." Another commented, "There's some horsing around going on at KFC." And a third person, scraping the barrel a wee bit now, I think probably the best 2 puns were taken by the time this person got on. "A side portion of horseradish with my chicken bucket." The people of Fife know how to turn a tragedy into a bit of comedy.
This isn't another horse meat scandal, is it? Like the Findus crispy pancakes that had horse meat in them. When was that? Like about 9-10 years ago?
I believe it was. It wasn't even that long ago. I think it was around 2012 when they found horse meat in. It wasn't just in Findus crispy pancakes. It was in like everything. A lot of very popular purveyors of red meat were found to have traces of horse meat in some of their more popular products. One guy actually, perhaps quite a highbrow commentator for Fife, said Kentucky Fried Cheval. Obviously, cheval being the French word for horse. So, a scholar. So yeah, that was my first story.
It's good. I mean, obviously, I should point out that we are in no way saying that KFC contain horse meat in their products. Just to make that clear,
they contain far worse ingredients.
Okay, so they won't be a sponsor for the podcast anytime soon. So yes. No, but that's great, and it shows the wonderful drive that people have for fast food in Scotland, that they are going to take their horse box into the KFC drive-through.
So what's your story? What's your first story, Nicky?
I was going to go with one first, but I'm going to keep it on a food-based level.
Oh, okay.
So this is from the Scottish Sun, and the headline is Glasgow dessert takeaway Smunchies is investigated by Just Eat over abusive customer message claims. The gist of the story is that a Glasgow dessert shop is being investigated. Smunchies, who are based in the Gallowgate area of Glasgow, have sent direct messages to a customer after placing an order. But these are abusive messages. Effectively, a customer has made an order, then has collected the order and then cancelled the order on Just Eat. Which I can imagine, and I can see the frustration of a small business owner. You know, effectively, you're losing money. They decided to direct message the customer, but they got the wrong customer. They sent a message to this woman, and it said, and I quote, "You stupid little person. Did you just order from us and collect order and make a refund complaint before expecting the order? If you, then clearly a little scumbag who is trying to test businesses, and I know you're pals with Lunch Glasgow, so tell them karma is a cunt. Listen,
God.
I will find out who is rotten to the core and who is honest making business." So obviously grammar isn't the selling point of Smunchies in Glasgow. I'm sure they're a wonderful establishment and there has been no horse meat found in Smunchies. However, they are sending abusive messages to customers. The customer that they sent this to replied with, "Who the fuck are you talking to? What are you even talking about?" Smunchies then replied with, "In a hotel making dingy orders, or your Just Eat account." The woman replied, "Look, I've ordered a waffle once from you. I don't know what you're talking about, but I won't be using your business again, that's for sure." Smunchies then replied with, "Listen, small world, silly little girl." The customer replied, "You're a crackpot." And Smunchies replied, "You're a trampoline." Now, is that a Glasgow expression? You're a trampoline? I've never really heard that before as a term of abuse.
No, it's coming from Glasgow, living there for a long time, I've never heard anyone get called a trampoline in a derogatory or indeed any other manner.
Since this, Smunchies have deleted all of their social media accounts. So I've no idea if Smunchies is still open for business. They have obviously felt embarrassed about the messages they were sent in. And if you need a trampoline, then Smunchies in Gallowgate in Glasgow is your place to go.
They're possibly going through a comprehensive rebranding exercise. They decided that Smunchies was a shite name anyway. So
I could imagine if it was You're a Balloon, but
yeah.
You're a Trampoline. I'm going to use that from now on. If anyone says anything, I'm going to be like, "You're a trampoline."
I wonder if perhaps there's like, you and I chat quite a lot over WhatsApp, and we occasionally, if we're in a hurry, we sometimes fall victim to the autocorrect. You know, if you're trying to spell a particular word and your phone just assumes that you want to spell a completely different word, or perhaps she was going for something else, or the person that was writing the message to the customer was going for something else. But I'm not sure what swear word would autocorrect. to trampoline.
It's a very strange... It's quite a specific word, though.
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine maybe you was trying to call her a tramp, but that's not a very Glaswegian term.
No, it's not.
But for her to say you're a trampoline, it's beautiful. I'm claiming that. I'm going to use trampoline from now on.
Okay.
So, bouncing to the next story.
Oh, my God.
What have you got? What else have you seen?
Well, this one also involves unpleasant behaviour. I should probably say before I read this that Scotland is very famous for having real gallows humour. I certainly don't condone any of what I'm about to describe, but it's still funny. And I'm sorry if you find it offensive, but it's funny. So the headline comes from the Daily Record. Drunk bigot screams anti-Catholic abuse at a dog and pulled trousers down at little boy's party. So this isn't two separate occurrences that you could be forgiven for thinking that from the way the headline's written. It all happened at the same time. The man's name is Brian Montgomery. He dropped his trousers, shouted anti-Catholic abuse at a dog, and also assaulted two people at a little boy's 10th birthday party in Falkirk earlier this year. I'm sure we've had some other stories from Falkirk in the last couple of episodes. So Brian Montgomery, who's 38 apparently, not sure why that's relevant, brandished a bottle at the little boy's mum, headbutted the youngster's uncle on the nose and punched out a light. He kicked off at the birthday party, which was held in May this year. There's a photograph of Brian in his Rangers scarf. It's quite a close-up of his face. It says, Falkirk Sheriff Court heard on Thursday that the event at an address in the town's Hall Glen featured a barbecue and adults were drinking. The prosecutor, Caitlin French, said that about 8 p.m. the neighbours let out a dog and the accused shouted, and again, these aren't I'm not condoning this behaviour, alright? The accused shouted, "Fuck the Pope, you Fenian bastards." Miss French went on to say that the birthday boy then told his mother that Montgomery had pulled his trousers down in front of everyone. This meant Montgomery's own trousers. The reporters had to just validate there, in case, I mean, that it would be terrible if he pulled the wee boy's trousers down in addition to everything else that he's been doing. The boy's
That's a
brother,
whole different story.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having a laugh at it well, we might. The boy's mother confronted Montgomery, resulting in Montgomery calling her a slut and a fucking bint. The Deputy Fiscal said only two guests left the party because of the way Montgomery was behaving, and the boy and his mother went inside, followed by Montgomery, who was still shouting, calling the boy's mum, who had arranged the party, a fat cow and a fat slut. Miss French said the wee boy stated that the accused had ruined his birthday, but the accused replied to the boy, "I've not fucking ruined your birthday." He then brandished a bottle and told the boy's mother, "It's all your fault. I'll smack you with this." Miss French said the boy's uncle stood up to stop Montgomery. Montgomery attempted to get the boy's mother and the boy began to cry. The fiscal said the boy and his mother ran away for safety and tried to call the police, but Montgomery grabbed the mother by the shoulder and continued to shout at her before punching out a light fitting. The boy's uncle then attempted to calm Montgomery down. Miss French said at this point the accused threw a bottle at him, which missed and struck the wall. He then headbutted the boy's uncle, bursting his nose, and punched him in the head. He was arrested, unsurprisingly, after the police turned up. And on the route to Falkirk Police Station, he kind of doubles down on his already inexcusable behaviour. He doubles down and starts shouting in the police car, "Fuck off, get to fuck the Pope, and Fenian bastards." So, I don't know if he's thought, well, I've fucked it anyway, I might as well just go for broke, So
I can understand. I mean, obviously, first of all, we're not condoning domestic violence in any way. We're laughing, but it's an amusing story. The fact that he is shouting sectarian abuse at a dog.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that a wee bit.
I mean, that's the main part of the story, really. That's the bit that fascinates me. Did he think it was Hoopy the Huddlehound that he was shouting sectarian abuse at?
The
Did
Celtic
he just
mascot.
think, oh, it's the Celtic mascot? Because obviously, as you said, he's pictured in his Rangers scarf. He's obviously a staunch Rangers man. Obviously, shouting abuse about the Pope. So, did he just get confused? Does he just not like dogs? If it was a bear, if the neighbour had a bear and he let him out in the garden, would he be giving thumbs up and saying, "All right, Broxy"?
So I wonder then, obviously Celtic have always been a successful team, but they've been particularly successful over the last 8 years or so since Rangers went tits up, and they've been arguably the strongest team in the Scottish Premiership. So are all these like die-hard Rangers fans who every time they see the Huddle Hound appearing at another Celtic victory, they're going out emotional and upset and just taking it out on dogs all over the west of Scotland?
Why would you scream sectarian abuse at a dog? It's bizarre. Obviously, he had something he needed to get out of his system, and he did, and then he dropped his trousers in front of a 10-year-old. We're kind of glossing over. That's horrific, but... And then...
It's not the worst thing he did.
For the 10-year-old to then say, "You've ruined my birthday," and him to reply, "I've not fucking ruined your birthday." That's amazing. It's not amazing. Sorry. It's not amazing. I'm not condoning that in any way, shape or form. But, oh my god, this is what the Swally's about. Stories like this. This is what we live for in Scotland. And it's Falkirk.
It's Falkirk. The thing is, right, you might be listening to this and you might be thinking, "Used to are out of order," laughing at that poor wee boy, his birthday party. Let me tell you something, right? I was a 10-year-old wee boy once, and that wee boy will be dining out on this story for fucking years. Any of his little pals that were at that party, and I could understand, probably quite traumatic at the time, but kids bounce back. They've got, see at his 21st birthday party, he'll be in the pub saying, "Oh, with all his pals, oh, remember that guy Brian at your 10th birthday? What a trampoline, man! See the stadium? Mind the culture dug a Fenian bastard."
Yeah, you're true. That's right. I would dine out in that story for a while.
Every clown.
Now, have you ever helped anyone move out of their house? Like, if you're living in a flat and you see one of your neighbours, moving out, would you help them to lift stuff?
If they asked me, I would. If they asked me, I'd go and help. But I wouldn't put myself out there.
Well, in Dundee, from the Dundee Courier, a good Samaritan helped a struggling man carry bags of gear down several flights of stairs, unaware he was in the middle of robbing his next door neighbour's home. Now, I'm pretty certain. I live in an apartment at the moment. There's maybe 30 apartment-like flats in this building. I don't know my neighbours to speak to properly, but I'm pretty certain I would recognise if some jakey cunt was lifting gear out in the flat, and in the lift. I wouldn't help. Anyway, this helpful neighbour accidentally helped Lewis Reed take bags of stolen swag worth nearly £3,000 out into the street. It was only after he had to remind him about stuff he'd left behind that he became suspicious. Now, it turns out that this was a top floor flat, and the burglar, Reed, had entered through the roof of the flat. So it was at 4:15 p.m. on a Saturday, and he heard noises, and the neighbour came out and he noticed a bag of belongings on the landing, and he helped him take them down the staircase because he thought he was moving out. Initially thinking the accused was a resident of the block, the neighbour asked him if he could assist in carrying his item. The accused agreed. Of course you would. You want a hand with this, mate? Aye, help me take this stuff down. They then exited, loaded it in the van, and then when the accused tried to get back in, and the door was locked, the neighbour said, "Oh, I forgot my keys. Have you got a key?" And then the guy's like, "Oh, no, I don't have a key. Because I came in through the fucking roof." And that's when the neighbour became suspicious. Right. Anyway, now, I have another suspicion about this. The flat that he burgled, he stole 3 guitars. Now, that's not uncommon. If he's a musician, that's fine. 3 guitars. 5 games consoles, 2 laptops, and various other items from the 3rd floor flat. 3 floors. So he's created a hole in the 3rd floor of this flat and entered through the roof space, stolen all these goods, and the neighbours helped him fucking lift it. He admitted breaking into the property and stealing goods worth £2,500. He also admitted breaking into another home 2 days later, so he wasn't even caught on this instance. 2 days later he did it again and stole goods worth £1,600. Reed, who is said to have a weighty previous record, so I don't know if he's in Weight Watchers or Fat Busters, but he's obviously got a weighty record. He was jailed for 27 months. So I am glad that our loft burgling, guitar stealing cunt from Dundee is now off our streets for 27 months. But that takes a fair effort to crawl into a roof and, to steal guitars. 5 games console, quite an impressive haul from a flat.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first question would be, how did he get up onto the roof? Because I remember my stepmother used to live in Paisley, and she lived in a top floor flat, and there was 2 flats on the top floor, and the boys that lived with the family on the same floor as her, they shared a loft, and they climbed up into the loft and kicked through her ceiling to rob her, to steal stuff off her, and it didn't take the police very long to deduct who the perpetrators were. But I wonder how this guy got away up onto the roof to be able to break in through the loft. Well, I've got one more very quick little Scottish story. It's not a particularly funny one. It's more of a surprising one. You're familiar with the town of Buckie in the northeast of Scotland, I assume?
Of course I am. Yeah. I have family that live in Cullen, so I was a regular visitor to Cullen, and Buckie is, of course, just next to Cullen. So yes, I'm very familiar with Buckie.
So you may also have a passing familiarity with the Buckie Thistle football team.
I am aware of Buckie Thistle. I could not tell you any of their players or anything, but yes, I am aware of Buckie Thistle.
Well, they have got a very surprising celebrity as a fan. So the last time when we did Gregory's Girl, when we spoke about Gregory's Girl, I should say, on the last podcast, we were talking. You had your story about your Alloa Athletic fan in Bradford who had never bothered his arse after 20 years of being a fan to get up to a game. You'll never believe who Buckie Thistle can count among their loyal fans. Okay, I'll read it to you. It says, Buckie Thistle bosses say it is great to have a celebrity as a fan. So obviously they must only have this one celebrity fan. After the growing bond between the club and horror master Stephen King sent jaws dropping across the Highland League over the weekend. The legendary horror writer mentioned the Moray club in his latest book, which was released in April. At the time, he told the Press and Journal that he had settled on the Jags, because Buckie Thistle also call themselves the Jags, out of every team in Scotland because he thought the name was so colourful. The club chiefs were delighted, if somewhat bemused by the unlikely bit of fame. Now normally, you'd be like, well, brilliant. If you're from Buckie, you'd be like, my local team has been put as a sort of character maybe in a book by one of arguably the most famous or celebrated living author in the world. But the book's got a bit of an unfortunate name. The book is called If It Bleeds. It says Mr. King, who has sold an estimated 350 million books, duly signed 2 copies to be auctioned off to raise cash for the club, which has, like all the local sides, taken a very big financial hit during the recent COVID-19 crisis. And as a thank you, the club sent him some merchandise in return. So if you go on the Press and Journal website, you can see a picture of Stephen King at home in Maine, proudly wearing his Bucky Thistle top and scarf. As Mr. King depicted an unlikely scenario where American youngsters cheered on the 2016-2017 Highland League champions from afar as part of an exchange programme. He told the Press and Journal that he looked at a number of football clubs while doing research for an exchange programme. Bucky Thistle was his choice because he thought the name was very colourful. He also said that he hopes to attend the game at some point. So maybe he'll come over to Scotland and go and cheer on the North East Jags. Then all the locals can go and ask him when he's going to put some money into the club.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that Stephen King has been a fan of Bucky Thistle longer than a friend of ours has been a fan of Ross County. That's brilliant. I think we've had a wonderful news roundup here.
Indeed, yeah.
We like to delve into a key piece of Scottish media, film, stage show, play every week and have a little review. And this week, it was your choice, Greg. So, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to talk about the television movie from 1979, starring Frankie Miller, Ken Hutchinson, and Gregor Fisher, Just a Boys' Game. It was part of the BBC had a programme on from 1970 to 1984 called The Play for Today, a sort of anthology series where it would be like a self-contained hour or hour and a half episode. Some of the plays or the shows went on to become TV series in their own right. Boys from the Black Stuff is quite a famous example of it, and Rumpole of the Bailey. Just a Boys' Game. It was written by Peter MacDougall. I believe it was his third production for Play for Today. It's set in Greenock over a Thursday and a Friday in the 1970s. As I mentioned before, it stars Frankie Miller, the famous rock musician. I think this was his only acting role, and he portrays Jake McQuillan, former sort of hard man around Greenock, trying to kind of grow up a little bit and leave his reputation behind while he goes on a bit of a booze odyssey with his pal Dancer, played by Ken Hutchinson, and his other pal Tanza, played by Gregor Fisher. So had you seen this before, Nicky?
It was my first time that I actually watched this, and usually for the podcast I will watch things twice. I watch it once to make notes, and then I watch it a second time to absorb. And I had to watch this back to back, effectively, because I watched it the first time and I loved it so much that I ended up going back and watching it pretty much straight away again. I really loved this, and one of the great things is that it helped me discover Frankie Miller as well, a musician I hadn't really thought about for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came across this years ago, maybe around the late 90s. I caught it on the BBC. It was on one Saturday night. Maybe they were commemorating something, or they were commemorating a Play for Today. I'm not really sure, but it was on one Saturday evening, and I watched it. And my main reason for watching it was because Gregor Fisher was in it, and with one or two other actors that I sort of half recognised. But then I didn't see it again for a long time. And about 2005, Peter MacDougall's work was released on DVD. The day the record, this is back in the days when I still bought a newspaper. The day the record, we're talking about the releases. Billy Connolly stars in a couple of Peter MacDougall's plays. He's in Just Another Saturday and Elephant's Graveyard. So I picked them up and kind of rediscovered Just a Boys' Game. And the thing that kind of really strikes me out of it the most is Frankie Miller. As far as I can find out in my research for the podcast, he'd never done any acting before. Obviously, a showman, being the front man for a band and successful musician and songwriter, but he's absolutely brilliant in it. You would never think. At no point do you get the impression that he's an amateur actor or he's new to it, and he's in almost every single scene. There's very few scenes that he doesn't appear in, and he's brilliant.
It was indeed. It was his only acting role. There's a great story that Billy Connolly tells, and it was in a documentary about Frankie Miller. Alex Harvey from the sensational Alex Harvey Band, someone owed him money, and he wanted to go and collect this debt, but he was a bit scared to go alone. So he asked Frankie if he would go with him. And he said, just stand behind me and give that face that you gave on the TV show. Just look menacing. And so Frankie went along with him and they got the money.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, he's as a musician, he's really highly respected all over the world. You know what I mean? Like when he had his brain hemorrhage, he was writing. He had just formed a new band with Nicky Hopkins and Joe Walsh. He was writing music when he fell ill, but he absolute amongst, like, I think he's a real musician's musician. You know, Rod Stewart reckons he's the only white guy that can make him cry. I'm not sure what he means. Maybe it's that face, like. Maybe it's that face that he does.
As I say, after watching this, I did go down a bit of a Frankie Miller rabbit hole on YouTube. And I downloaded his first 4 albums, I think. And he really is a true talent.
There's a little concert that he did in the 70s that's on. You can see it on YouTube. And he's in Germany. And I don't know if it's maybe the first time he'd ever played in Germany. He looks quite young in the footage. I think I'd heard before that German audiences, they tend to be quite respectful of whoever they're watching, but not necessarily. They won't necessarily show their enthusiasm like perhaps American or British crowds at concerts do. But they'll sit very politely and they'll clap after every song, to show that they've enjoyed the performance. And I guess Frankie wasn't used to that type of appreciation. So it's like when he finishes a song and there's this polite smattering of applause, and he's like, "Is there anybody out there?" He's all still awake.
The Voyager pub, of course, just where we first see Frankie, and his luscious long locks. It just reminded me of your dad. The pictures I've seen of your dad from the 70s on Facebook, Frankie Miller just looked a hell of a lot like him. In those Facebook photos I've seen of your dad,
yeah,
your dad looks like Frankie Miller back in the day.
Well, my dad doesn't have that lovely sort of honey-coloured hair that Frankie has, unfortunately. The Voyager pub, I think, is worth discussing because the film is set in Greenock. In the 1970s. Now, I was born in 1978, so obviously, I was only 1 when this came out. But when I was a wee boy, I can remember parts of Glasgow being like really quick. I mean, Glasgow went through a massive kind of regeneration in the 1980s and the early 1990s with the whole Glasgow Smiles Better and the Glasgow Garden Festival, European City of Culture, all that kind of thing. But I can certainly remember parts of it that were yet to be developed that were, like pretty grim, The Voyager pub, straight away, and we've all been in pubs where you suddenly get that little kind of frisson that something's going to fucking kick off any minute. Just like a voice will raise slightly, or there's the air gets a bit thick. But for that whole first scene when they're in there, it could be your first time watching this, and I guess we're ruining it for you, but you just know that something's going to kick off. As soon as they start, they start kind of bantering with the barmaid, and the girl bumps into Dancer and makes him spill his drinks, and he kind of noises her up a bit. I don't know if I'd be that enthusiastic to go to the Voyager pub, Nicky.
No, it's not the type of place that I would go. I do remember in student days, we would obviously go to the nicer places. I mean, the cheaper places, but you wouldn't go anywhere that you would get into fights or trouble. There was one occasion, there was a group of us out, and we went to the Belmont Bar on Belmont Street. Now, it wasn't a massively rough pub, but it had a little bit of a reputation. Anyway, we were probably in our early 20s, and we thought it would be hilarious to go up to the jukebox and put like £5 into the jukebox and put Cotton Eye Joe by Rednecks on repeat. I think it lasted until the third play, and then we were asked to leave the pub.
Well, I can remember, we would sometimes, in our Aberdeen days, if it had been a particularly heavy one, we'd maybe go to the schooner down at the docks that used to open really early in the morning for the guys coming in off the boats. If you're feeling a bit brave, a bit gallus after a night, on the booze, whatever, and you could sort of go in there, and it was always kind of, the guys that frequented pubs like that, they were like kind of professional pubs. They weren't the kind of people that drank in the pubs that we would normally drink in. These were the full-on pint of lager and a half a whiskey. That's around. They sort of bed in, kind of dig their foxhole. They know they're going to be in there for a while, and like proper drinkers. I can remember my uncle taking me to the Masonic Lodge just off Saracen Street in Postle Park after a funeral once, and I just didn't belong in there. Do you know what I mean? And that's not me saying anything disparaging against the people that were in it, but yeah, I don't come from that world, Maybe when I was a wee boy, I did, but as an adult, I don't belong in those pubs. And even my uncle said, "You don't belong in here, son." Come on, we'll go up the tune.
The Voyager does indeed set the tone for the play, and one of my favourite lines and interactions is in the very beginning when, of course, there's the altercation with the boyfriend and the girl.
That's my bird. Serves you right.
Yeah, that the sort of ticker tape is kind of lit for the whole episode in that little scene that you described there. So yeah, so the story is of Jake sort of taking the high road and going home that night, but his pal Dancer is up for. He's got a carry out. The carry out bag never wavers. Jake says they end up. Jake goes off to his work on the Friday morning, and Dancer, who's been on the lash, he's been home for a sleep on the couch, managed to run away from home by sticking a load of bread up his shirt, and then goes out. He tells his wife he's just gone out for a loaf. The reality is he's straight into the off licence, and then this is the thing. Jake's a crane operator at the shipyard in Greenock, and Dancer climbs up the crane to his wee cabin at the top of the crane.
Indeed, just prior to that, you get to meet Jake's grandmother, and you get to see the relationship that they have. And, of course, you get to meet his grandfather, and the two of them are sat there, and the granddad just comes out with,
"You're a big dick."
So they tell me.
You're no good to yourself here.
I didn't ask to come here.
Well, get the hell out of it then.
You can't leave it, can you?
Listen, I'm due for planting any time now, and her next door, she's going to win a marathon and lift a Queen's telegram. You'll be humpy back it before you're allowed to leave this house.
And that does set the tone of the relationship, what the grandfather and Jake have. And, of course, you have to remember that, effectively, the grandfather killed Jake's dad, and they said he was away in America, but he was actually in prison. Yes, then, as you say, Dancer, of course, goes to visit Jake at the docks and declares that today is a holiday.
I've just declared Friday a holiday, that's all.
I mean, I've got to say, Ken Hutchinson is brilliant in this as Dancer, and I read but there's not a huge amount about Ken Hutchinson online, but apparently a very, very highly respected character actor. There was the one line I did see about him. Somebody had written that Hollywood's loss was the UK's gain when he didn't, because he was in Straw Dogs. Ken Hutchinson, the Sam Peckinpah's film with Dustin Hoffman and Susan George, the one set in the south of England. He plays one of the villains in Straw Dogs, and he's also in Just Another Saturday, which is also written by Peter MacDougall, about the Orange Band in Glasgow. He plays an Orangeman. But I mean, there's loads of things he's been in. He was in the Sweeneys and all sorts. But he seems to have to kind of quote a line from the film. He's kind of hung up his guns. Ken Hutchinson, I think. He's still living, but he doesn't seem to be acting anymore. But he's absolutely brilliant as dancer.
Well, we then get to meet Clatty Bella, and it's so sad, but it's so funny, the interactions. Dancer is so obviously trying to get a threesome on the go with Jake and Clatty Bella and himself, and Jake is just not interested in this, and I'd be the same as Jake and just want to leave.
You have to admire Jake's tact. He's like, yeah, you go and get started. I'll just go for fags.
Yes, the ice cream van for fags. It's wonderful. And we had a school van that used to come to our school at lunchtime. We'd park outside and sold pick and mix and ice cream, but they also sold cigarettes. And you could buy a packet, but you could buy a single cigarette for, I think it was 20p back then, as long as you had a national insurance card, because that proved that you were over 16, so you could purchase cigarettes from this ice cream van.
The van man has got a great line as well when he's asking what they're. He says, "Oh, is that you up at Clatty Bella's?" And Jake says, "Yeah, it's good day for it."
The next part, when they go to the garage and meet Gregor Fisher's character, this is a theme that I think is going to be quite prevalent throughout the Swally in terms of actors. So we get to see Dave Anderson. Now, of course, he played, probably most famously, Mr. McClelland in City Lights. But going back to the last episode, he also played Gregory's dad in Gregory's Girl.
I mean, I think what we'll find as we go through different shows and films over the episodes is there are just some Scottish staples. Like he is a very good example of one, but there's also Eileen McCallum who plays the wife in the car as well. That's giving him a hard time because he can't work out the petrol pump. But she was in the Steamy. She was in Take the High Road for years. She was one of the main characters. She ran the shop in Take the High Road. She's in at least two other Peter MacDougall productions. The first one that he had commissioned, Just Your Luck, and as she plays the mother in Just Another Saturday. So she's another sort of actor of that time that just seems to, and I'm sure she was more recently in River City as well. Eileen McCallum. I'll have to look her up, but I'm sure that she did a stint in River City as well, maybe about 10-15 years ago.
The scene in the snooker hall where he bundles the young guy into the toilet when he discovers McCafferty is on his way, and he just doesn't say anything. It's just, in the office, and the menacing stares that he gives this guy, the young kid, and just stares him down.
That's the scene that really kind of solidifies the character's reputation. You know what I mean? Like he's obviously at one point he's been like quite a feared kind of hard guy, and this young guy has been kind of captured by him in the toilets, and he's kind of roughed him up a wee bit just by bustling him into the toilet. But he just stares at him. He just stares at him until the young guy just bursts into tears. You know what I mean? So even though the character of this young guy is probably running about with a team of boys and trying to be hard himself and all that, and kind of go for the title, if you like, And, you know, he's just, he realises that this character, Jake, could quite easily just leave him in pieces in the toilet. To your point, without Jake saying anything or really threatening him, you know, he just kind of stares him down until he bursts into tears and tells him everything that he wants to know, you know.
This, of course, leads to the climactic brawl in the shipyard. And the line that gets delivered when they realise that the guys are waiting for them, you know, in front of them. And I think Dancer says, you know, we'll go the other way. And Jake delivers the line,
all right, then, back the way we came.
You don't go back.
You don't go back. It's such a pivotal line, and that's the life that they live. You know, you don't go back. That's the way that they live their life and their codes that they adhere to.
Yep. I mean, and considering that it's, you know, it's obviously it's quite old. It was probably made on a bit of a budget because it was BBC television production. The fight, the violence is, you know, it's squeamishly realistic. You know what I mean? The guys, you know, when you see the kind of young guys turn up and they're pulling like razors and machetes out of their jacket pockets and everything, you get that sort of, this isn't going to go well at all. And then when it kicks off and they're swiping and kind of rolling about with each other and all that, it feels incredibly authentic and uncomfortable. And you know, like a lot of films and TV shows, they get a bit of a hard time in the media for glamorizing violence. I think, you know, this goes completely the other way. You know, if you had never had a fight in your adult life, after watching that, you'd probably maybe take extra care to avoid one. Do you know what I mean? Because you just kind of want that scene to be over. And of course, when it does come to an end, it has quite a tragic end, with Dancer trying to run away from the two guys with the knives, and he kind of clotheslines himself on a shipping rope and ends up falling down onto I'm not sure what it is he lands on, but the kind of bottom of the dock, right, under the sort of dry dock. He falls into the dry dock, right, next to the ship.
Yes, and that is a terrible ending for Dancer. He's the happy-go-lucky part of the trio, and he just wants to have a laugh and have his holiday, but he meets his, you know, untimely demise. And, of course, Jake isn't going to back down, so we get to the wonderful line. And is this a Glaswegian term for let's go for it?
McCafferty! You're teasing!
Yeah, it is. But, I mean, it's more just your beat. You know, I think it can be used in any sort of context. You know, if you think you're going to the pub tonight, well, you're teased out. It's more of it's not so much let's have a fight. It's more the, you know, you're beaten, or this isn't happening for you. You know, I think that is more in that context. But yeah, that's quite a common one. It's not as obscure as calling somebody a trampoline.
Well, obviously, a trampoline is now the correct term of abuse to use in Glasgow if you're going to be getting into a fight. And, of course, to discuss the ending, when Jake's grandfather is on his deathbed, effectively, and that leads to a couple of great scenes.
Yeah, with Jake and his mother. So we didn't really talk about that. It's established quite early on in the first scene with Jake and his granny, and we learn that Jake was left with his granny. Presumably after his father died, his mother, for reasons that aren't really explained, didn't want to or couldn't raise him or whatever. and she lives. We find out later on as well that she lives near to Clatty Bella's, so he's trying to avoid walking past her window. But then, in this last scene that you're talking about, or these late scenes rather that you're talking about, the mother has turned up with his auntie and his uncle because they expect that the granddad doesn't have long left. And I have to say, we didn't say the granddad's played by Hector Nicholl, who was quite a famous stand-up comedian in Scotland. So he's sort of very much playing against type, but he plays the bitter old sort of former kind of gang leader or hard man really, really well. And I think you sort of learn in these scenes that all that Jake's ever really craved was a bit of approval from his granda, by kind of following the same kind of violent tendencies, violent life that his granddad had followed. All he's really wanted is that sort of stamp of approval. And the first thing that Granda says to him is, "I was never fond of you."
I've never been fond of you.
That's the thing. He killed Jake's father, but Jake just wants his respect. He was the big man, and, well, that effectively ends the story.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's sort of bittersweet because Jake's character, when we first meet him, he's gotten into a bit of a skirmish in the pub, but we're sort of told that he doesn't really march to the beat of that drummer anymore. He's a wee bit older. He works. He knows he's working the next day, so he's not going to stay out in the lash with the guys and all that, but. Kind of through the process of the story, he's boozing and he finds actually, because of the events in the pub, he doesn't really want to walk away from it. He feels just the same as he had felt when he was younger. He's still got something to prove. He's not going to let these young guys come and, kind of take him down. And it's all just, all that is just underpinned by this relationship that he has with his grandfather.
I do have a slight issue with this, if I had to pick anything. And at the beginning, you get to see the bond and the relationship that Jake has with his grandmother. Little things like when they're speaking, the granddad says, "Get my bed ready," and she turns round and sticks out her tongue at Jake. And you kind of get that feeling they have this bond. And towards the end, when the grandfather is, passing away and Jake's having a go at his mum and his uncle, and he says that they've all bled him dry, and includes the grandmother in this, which doesn't really fit with the relationship that I thought they had.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure what he was getting at there, whether it's part of his sort of transition. But he sort of regressed back to where the granda's the one that he wants to identify with, not the granny, not the mother, not the uncle.
Could be, yeah. It's only 71 minutes long, and I would not cut anything from this. There's no fat to trim in this play. It's thoroughly enjoyable and a very easy watch.
I mean,
it's amazing.
I think that's the sort of beauty of these sort of anthology series, like kind of Play for Today. The example we're talking about. It's going to be in a TV. You don't have like 2 hours to tell a story. You don't have like 6 1-hour episodes to tell a story. It's very economical writing by Peter MacDougall. And it is basically a play. A play without an interval, and if you watch Peter MacDougall's other other plays for today. I mean, there's only one. I think there's only ever written one film, and that's Sense of Freedom about Jimmy Boyle, which is an actual film. But his other ones, like Just Another Saturday, Elephant's Graveyard, it's very economical. It's an hour. It's pacey. The story doesn't really slow down. To use your expression, there's no fat there. It's just, this is a story. This is everything that you need to know about these characters. And they're established immediately from meeting them. If you go through them, we meet Jake, Dancer, and Tanza in the pub. You kind of know everything that you need to know about these guys in the first couple of minutes. And then even when you meet Dancer's wife later on, that their relationship is established. And that scene's only about 10 minutes long, but you know everything about their relationship straight away. She's frustrated with him. She knows that he's unreliable and he's got a booze problem and everything, yet he can always win her round. She's still really fond of him. He's got a good relationship with his kids. It's just, it's a real masterclass. What's interesting about Peter MacDougall is that he's got no formal training. He didn't study writing. He was he comes from Greenock, where most of his work is set. He's worked in the shipyards. He's decided when he's 17 that working in the yards isn't for him. He's gone off to London to become a house painter, and it's just he's been lucky enough to meet the actor and writer Colin Welland, and kind of befriend him when he was painting his house. And Colin Welland's encouraged him to write about his experiences, and it's a great story. And when you see Peter MacDougall being interviewed now, he's not what you would expect from a very successful and celebrated writer. He's a very down-to-earth guy.
The three guys, they're a group of friends, and you can relate to that. You've got Jake, who's the guy that you would want to back you up in a fight. But he's also, I don't know if he's necessarily the guy that goes looking for the fight anymore. But if there was going to be a fight, you want him on your side. Then Tanza, who is your proper mate, and he's going to stick with you through thick and thin and always be there. And then, of course, there's Dancer, who is the joker, the comedy guy in the circle. But unfortunately, he's the one that meets the sad end.
Yeah. I mean, and because you've met his wife and his children, and it makes what happens to him all the more tragic. If it had been Tanza that had been killed at the end, it wouldn't have had the same impact, because he's actually not in it all that much, Gregor Fisher. There's a full sort of 30-40 minutes where we don't even see him. But yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of sort of shows what I think quite accurately what the west of Scotland was like in the 1970s. The scenes in the shipyard toilets are really funny, with the old guy that's hiding from the foreman in the cubicle, and he's got his apprentice bringing him cups of tea and all that. I think everybody says that if you want to embark on being a writer, you should write about what you know, and I think that's what Peter MacDougall's done in all his work. He doesn't create these worlds but he's lived in them, and he can articulate them incredibly well.
So out of all of those involved in Just a Boys Game, who do you think went on to have the best career?
I would probably say, because we haven't really mentioned that the play was directed by John Mackenzie, and I think I would probably have to put him down as the best career, because he went on to direct The Long Good Friday, sort of seminal 1980s British gangster film with Bob Hoskins and Charlie off Casualty, bizarrely. And he directed...
Helen Mirren.
And Helen Mirren, sorry, of course, yeah. And Pierce Brosnan, so... his work beyond that is he did The Fourth Protocol with Michael Caine and Pierce Brosnan, and he also directed a show that we'll maybe talk about in a future episodes called, and you would probably remember this. Remember Looking After Jojo?
Yes, I do, and in fact, it's on my list of things that I would like to review for the podcast. Spoiler alert, but we'll get to it one day.
So he directed I think it was like a 3 or 4 parter, Looking After Jojo. He directed all those episodes. So yeah, I guess I would probably, if we're talking about who had the most successful career in the world of acting, and not, if it's going to be music, it's going to be Frankie Miller. But I think in that industry, I would have to say John McKenzie.
I'd have to agree with you on that. Frankie Miller, it could be argued, but he obviously had an established career anyway. Perhaps Gregor Fisher, because he was, recognisable and well known for, Rhapsody Nesbitt, Naked Video, Baldy Man. But yeah, I think I would probably say you're right on John McKenzie.
I mean, I watched an interview with Peter MacDougall, quite a recent interview. There's a podcast called Chin Wags with Ginty. Sorry, not Ginty, because we were talking about Jint McGinty's last night. Chin Wags with Jinky, where Peter MacDougall's been interviewed, and he said of all his Play for Today output, it was all made by the BBC, but not by BBC Scotland. So BBC Scotland turned all these things down. They were still made because the BBC proper, the London-based BBC, saw the merit in them, and they were obviously all still filmed in Greenock and Glasgow in Scotland. But he said, he said that he was having a really successful career, like quite a successful career, until he left London and moved back to Scotland. And I remember going to the Sunday Mail Sports Awards years ago, and I met, what's his name? Kenny Dalglish was being honoured, and so there was a few Scottish celebrities there. And I was talking to David Hatham, who was in Trial and Retribution, and he plays Jimmy Boyle in A Sense of Freedom, and lots of other stuff as well. Quite a famous actor. And we were talking about Peter MacDougall, and he said that Peter MacDougall can't get anything, or this would have been about 2010. He said he can't get anything commissioned. He writes a lot of poetry now. He's not writing drama anymore. Now I don't know. I was thinking, why would BBC Scotland turn all that sort of thing down? But I think probably at the time Scotland had a bit of a stigma, especially the west of Scotland. So sort of Glasgow sectarian division, and a reputation as being like a hard city and that sort of thing. And the BBC Scotland didn't really want to, in their minds, maybe promote that element of the culture, whereas the London-based BBC just wanted to produce good drama. I'm not sure, but it's interesting. I mean, there's Oran Moor in the West End of Glasgow, at the top of Byers, on the sort of corner of Byers Road and Great Western Road. It's a nightclub, and it's also got a little theatre in it. And I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do, every day they would do a play, a pie and a pint, and they would commission plays. So Greg Hemphill, for example, he had a couple of plays there, and they were like little short things, like maybe barely even a sketch, like sort of 30 minutes at lunchtime. You go in, you have your pie, you have your pint, you watch a play. It would only ever happen in Glasgow, that sort of thing. And I believe Peter MacDougall had a couple of, I think he had a couple of things put on there in this format. But it'd be great to see him make a comeback with. You were thinking the times we live in now with all the streaming platforms, and there's a lot more money being put into producing really good drama than ever before. You'd like to think that there's maybe a comeback in the cards for him.
So I think that probably wraps up Just a Boys Game. Thank you once again for introducing this to me, Greg. I really enjoyed it. Well, I was thinking, we have done a stage show, we've done a film, and technically we've just done a play. So I thought, let's do a TV show. So I absolutely loved this show when it was first on, but I don't think I've seen it since it was first on. It's only 6 parts, so it's not too long that we're going to have to watch. So this is a 1999 Channel 4 series which follows the ups and downs of a young Glaswegian band, Jock Swally. I'd like to look at The Young Person's Guide to Becoming a Rock Star.
Oh,
Have
brilliant.
you ever seen it?
Do you know, I remember watching the first episode when it was on, because I think Mandy off EastEnders is in it.
Yes, she was indeed. Yes, doing a Scottish accent.
No, so yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Well, thank you very much for listening, everyone. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram at cultureswallypod, or you can email us with anything you'd like us to review or any news stories you'd like us to cover on cultureswally@gmail.com. Until next time, see you later.
See you later.
Oh, get yourself to fuck.